Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. And hopefully, you're going to try and use your brain power this morning to understand some Shakespeare for beginners. Shakespeare can be very intimidating and scary if you haven't done it before because of the language there. So, this is why we're going to take a look at today so you can come up with some prior knowledge. Okay. So let's take a look at one of our documents. Where do we even begin when we look at Shakespeare? Like, what book are you guys looking at? Which play? You are looking at Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet. Okay, so let's take a look at some things that are going to give you some prior knowledge, understanding what's going on in this play. Okay, guys? Right, where do you even begin? Right, firstly, it's interesting to look at life in London, what it was like back then in the late 1500s, early 1600s. Okay, that's what time period we're looking at. And we'll be looking at some of the most common words and phrases used. Okay, and one of the ways to think about the language Shakespeare is using is to think of it as a bit of a foreign language called early modern English. Otherwise, you're going to feel a bit confused, a bit baffled. Okay, it'll make the text more comprehensible if you think you're doing it like that. So that's a bit of a mindset change there. Okay, right, so here are some strategies that we're going to use to help you read your Romeo and Juliet, understand it, and be able to answer questions on it. Okay, right, the first thing you need to do is read a summary of the plot, which you can find online or in the actual book itself. So let's take a quick look at a summary of the plot. Right, let me move this. Summary of the plot. Okay. Oops, that's characters. Right, here is the plot that we're looking at. Right, you know when you have to do your own writing to write a story, there's 5 stages in plot development. It's exactly the same with Shakespeare. Okay, there's the introduction, complication or rising action, the climax, crisis or turning point. Then we have a resolution or falling action or a consequence. Then we have a denouement, a catastrophe, or just simply a conclusion. Okay, so you're going to find these 5 stages in the plot. Let's take a look at the plot, first of all, of Romeo and Juliet. First of all, you get something called a prologue, and this gives the setting and theme of the play and prepares us for the drama in which the destiny of 2 lovers is determined by fate and external circumstances. They can't control their own lives. It's going to be controlled by external circumstances. So basically, there's an ancient vendetta, which the 2 families can't even remember about, between the 2 powerful families. They're called the Montagues and the Capulets. And of course, it's all going to end in bloodshed and death. So they're still quarreling about something that started hundreds of years ago. They can't remember what it's about. Anyway, to continue with the plot, a group of masked Montagues, they risk more conflict by gate crashing a Capulet party. They shouldn't be gate crashing, should they? The young, lovesick Romeo, who had originally wanted to marry a girl called Rosaline, falls instantly in love with Juliet. And she's supposed to marry a husband that her father chose for her, and his name is Paris. However, with the help of Juliet's nurse, the women arrange for the couple to be married, and then Romeo's attempt to halt a street fight leads to the death of Juliet's cousin. And then Romeo gets blamed for that, and he's banished, supposed to be put into exile. However, in a desperate attempt to be reunited with Romeo, Juliet follows the friar's advice. We'll look at the characters just now. And what does she do? She fakes her own death. That's a bit dodgy, isn't it? Faking your own death. The message fails to reach Romeo, and he really thinks Juliet is dead. So he also takes his life in her tomb. And then Juliet wakens from a drug she's taken to find Romeo's corpse beside her. So she's also stricken with grief, and she kills herself. Oh my goodness, so drama. And that's when the family agreed to end their feud. Like, my goodness, couldn't you have done it before your children killed themselves off? Anyway, so you've read, now you know a summary of the plot, okay? As we said, you can find them online or in your book. Now, what you should try, which book you should have should be annotated. In other words, there should be notes in it, okay? So that's very important. It helps you, okay? Next thing you need to do is a read through as you would any book that you're reading. I mean, I know there's some people that have never ever read a book, which is crazy, and some people still haven't got them yet, as I can see, but you will get it by and by, and this information is going to help you. So you take some notes if you need to. Right, then what do you do after you've read the book and it's like, oh, I can't follow this thing? What you need to do is practice saying the characters' names aloud so that you know how to pronounce them, because then it's easier to get to know those characters. Okay, so saying the characters' names aloud is very good. Let's take a look at some of their names. Well, first of all, you've got something called the chorus. What on earth is that? It's actually a single character which was developed for Greek drama, and he basically functions as a narrator. Goes along. So if you see the chorus, that's exactly what it is. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. Okay, let's look at a short character study of Romeo. Okay, Romeo is a young man of about 16. He's handsome, intelligent, and sensitive. I wonder if that's like the guys in our class, hey? Though impulsive and immature, his idealism and passion make him an extremely likable character. He lives in the middle of a violent feud between his family and the Capulets, but he's not interested in violence. His only interest is love. So he's a bit of a lovesick kind of dude. However, at the very beginning of the play, he's madly in love with a woman named Rosaline, who never ever appears in the play at all. They just talk about her, okay? But the minute he lays eyes on Juliet, he falls straight in love with her and forgets Rosaline. Of course, the thing is, Rosaline has vowed never ever to marry, and she's going to become a nun, so it's a bit of a lost case, lost cause. Okay, so that's how Romeo falls in love with Juliet. The minute they see each other, they were goners. Right, and you wonder, gosh, is Romeo very fickle? Does he change his mind often like this? But he goes to extremes to prove the seriousness of his feelings. He secretly marries Juliet, the daughter of his father's worst enemy. He happily takes a Bruce from Tybalt, which is, of course, Juliet's relative, and he would rather die than live without his beloved. Okay. Romeo is also an affectionate and devoted friend. So Romeo, you know how to pronounce that, and there's a little bit about Romeo. And then, of course, we've got Juliet. Juliet, let's look at a little bit about her. She's the daughter of Capulet and Lady Capulet, obviously. A beautiful 13-year-old girl. She's very beginning begins the play as a naive child who had thought little about love and marriage, but she grows up quickly when she falls in love with Romeo, the son of her family's greatest enemy. Okay? And because she's a girl in an aristocratic family, she has none of the freedom Romeo has to roam around the city, climb over walls in the middle of the night, or get into sword fights like Romeo does. Nevertheless, she shows amazing courage in trusting her entire life and future to Romeo, even refusing to believe the worst reports about him when he gets involved with the fight with Tybalt. Okay. Juliet's closest friend and confidant is not really her mom, it's her nurse, who she's had since she was a little girl. And unfortunately for women in those days, and there's still some today that have to do this, she has to obey her father's wishes in everything. So there's a bit of a gender theme going on here as well. Okay. Right. There's Lady Capulet, who's Juliet's mother. Her father's just called Capulet, who's the patriarch of the Capulet family. So he makes all the decisions, makes all the rules. Particularly in African countries, there's a lot of patriarchy, still goes on to this day. Who else is here? There's Montague, which is Romeo's dad, and there's Lady Montague. Okay. There's another prince in the picture. He's Prince Aeschylus. Prince Aeschylus. And he's the Prince of Verona. That's where the action takes place. Okay. So he's very concerned about keeping peace and law and order in his city. So he doesn't want the Capulets and the Montagues to be fighting, quarreling, and feuding. We've got a guy called Mercutio, a relative of the prince and Romeo's close friend. We'll look at more details later. We've got someone called Paris, which is the person that Juliet's dad wants her to marry. We've got Benvolio, Romeo's cousin and friend. We've got Tybalt, who is Juliet's cousin. We've got the nurse, and we've got Friar Lawrence, whom you will meet later on in the play. There's a whole bunch of minor characters, but I don't think we need to look at them at the moment. If you look at the setting for Romeo and Juliet, it's set in the 14th century, okay, which is the 1300s in Verona, Italy, which is very, very hot in summer, okay, a bit like Namibia, Joburg, etc. Much of the action takes place in Juliet's house and in another little place called Mantua. Okay. Violence is a dramatic device that puts the tragedy into top gear. And of course, it's set in Italy. And Elizabethan and Jacobean audiences had special prejudices about Italy. So when a dramatist of the time set a play in Italy, it was a kind of shorthand that said, this play is about feuds, passion, and violence. Okay, so Shakespeare set it in the foreign country of Italy, because Shakespeare believed this would make the plays more exotic and maybe help the audience fully understand the true story behind them. Let's go back to our strategies. So that was looking a little bit at the characters. Then another very good way to understand the play is to rent or buy or just watch a copy of the movie of the play, okay, or find it on YouTube, okay, and this will help you understand what's really going on. There's also a website called No Fear Shakespeare or Barnes and Noble. You can look there. It's got very simple language and explains things simply. Right, and there is of course a BBC production of it, and they have amazing world famous actors who are really good, but it's very difficult. Right. So once you've done all that, looked at a movie, got familiar with the characters, you know the plot, then you should get around to reading the play properly, because you should be able to understand it a bit better. Anything that's very difficult, reread it. Okay? And this is when now you have to take some action of your own. You need to start making notes on the plot, any subplots, and any theme. Maybe you need to look at what the characters are like and what motivates them and how they interact with each other. Think about what the play might tell you even about your So that's the strategies you should be using before you start really taking note of what's happening in Romeo and Juliet. Now, people back in those days were very, very superstitious. Again, we're looking at prior knowledge, which might help you understand how characters behave. Okay? Right, some people can protection from the plague. Can you believe it? Well, they tried, but you know, they got the plague, you are a god. When someone sneezed. And why did they do that? To ward off the devil that could enter your body when you open your mouth to sneeze. Okay? People nowadays still say, touch wood, if they're superstitious. And again, that's to prevent evil spirits hearing what you really want. Okay? We don't want anything to be jinxed. Okay. Right, walking under ladders was considered to bring back luck. Why? Because they were associated with the gallows, executions, and hangings. That's what the gallows were all for. Spilling pepper or salt was considered to bring bad luck. Leaving the door of a room open was also bad luck. Also probably gave you a draft because there was no heating in those days. Okay. Right, even stirring a pot anti-clockwise when you were cooking food would bring you bad luck. Keeping shoes on a table, oh, you might die if you do that. To this day, you'll see most chefs cut a cross in Brussels sprouts. Maybe you've only had them for your Christmas lunch or something, but people believed then that evil spirits or tiny demons hid between the leaves of lettuce, sprouts, or cabbage. And if you ate them, you would be swallowing them, okay? And you could get ill, very ill. So a cross was cut at the bottom of every sprout or cabbage to drive the evil spirits from their leaves. Heard of the evil eye, okay? That's just the way people look at you. And some people think they're someone you didn't know looked at you, and they looked at you with malice, okay? And you might fall ill or die. So it's what's called the evil eye. So to protect someone from overlooking you with the evil eye, you can spit, cross your fingers, carry a piece of iron, wear a red thread, or even, as they do in many parts of southern Europe today, wear a blue bead or the image of an open hand. You'll see there's lots of necklaces with a picture of an open hand there, and it's to ward off the evil eye. I mean, can you believe it? Weddings, a lucky garter of the bride. When they do that, all the unmarried men actually fought viciously to get that bride's garter. So that would mean they would have a lovely, beautiful wife. Cutting the wedding cake, the bride was supposed to cut it with the groom's hand over his, as it does nowadays, because if the bride doesn't cut that first slice of wedding cake, they won't have any children. Everyone can get to kiss their beloved under the mistletoe at Christmas. If it's hung over the door, it was a sacred oath that the host wouldn't kill his guests, even if they were mortal enemies, and that person would have to defend them against attack for as long as they stayed in a house that had mistletoe. Okay? Some of you may have seen some Game of Thrones bits and pieces. The one family thought they could visit another one, and there was mistletoe there. So that person didn't believe, the bad family didn't believe in mistletoe. So they might be cursed forever, or they're going to come to a bad end. Okay. How do you get some good luck? That was all about bad luck. Well, there weren't many ways to get good luck. Touch a man who's about to be hanged. Remember when there was a hanging or an execution, all the people came to watch it like it was a day at the movies. So if you can touch that man who's going to die, you might get some good luck. Or if you're out in the countryside, if you let a cow breathe all over you, that would bring you good luck. If you spit into a fire, it might bring you good luck. Okay, pinning bay leaves to your bay leaves to your pillow on the eve of St. Valentine's Day, you might see a vision of your future husband. Okay, so that could be a bad thing. Right, let's look at some other background info. This shows you how every single person was superstitious, which means it would be quite easy for them to be fooled by anyone discussing that sort of thing. Right, here, let's look at some more prior information that's going to help you. During Shakespeare's time, people's lives were very short. 50% of all children born never got to the age of 15. They all died from diseases, even just something simple like toothache, which would fester and go fraught. They're going to die. So we're quite lucky we've got some good modern medicines that help. The average lifespan of an adult was only 30. So you were actually old once you got into your 20s. Really strange. Right, London back in Shakespeare's time was home to around 100,000 people. So that was huge. So that shows how many germs were around then. So that included royalty, nobility, merchants, artisans, laborers, actors, beggars, thieves and spies, as well as refugees from Europe generally, because they were escaping from political or religious persecution. Okay. And they knew that they could get lost in a big city like London and no one would ever find them. Okay. There was people from Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and France. Okay. So London was actually quite cosmopolitan back then. Okay. So there's a picture of the Globe Theatre, which is where a lot of Shakespeare's plays were performed. Looks like, of course, later on, it burned down, didn't it? And then later, white paint sort of thing. Now, here's some of the dress of the day. If you were around there, this is what you would look like back then in the 1600s. Gosh, the men look quite weird. The ladies, of course, look fine, but a bit overdressed. Okay. Now, there was a picture of Queen Elizabeth I. You see around her neck the ruff, R-U-F-F, a blue one and a white one. So they were very into that sort of thing, fashion-wise. There you go. Right, there's going to be a lot of talk about the court, which referred to the palaces and to the people who surrounded the monarch, which is Queen Elizabeth I, and later on James I, and they all traveled with her. She had a huge entourage, just like a rock star might have nowadays. The court's frequent movements were really motivated by basic practicalities, because those thousands of people produced waste very quickly, and that overwhelmed all the sanitation facilities at the palace. So they had to leave one palace, move to another palace, and wait till the first palace got cleaned out. Okay, so they had just actually invented flush toilets then, one of Elizabeth's courtiers, but they never got around to installing it in Shakespeare's day. So although life at court might be considered luxurious, it could also really stink. Okay, right. For those who have been listening, you'll have learned a little bit of prior knowledge about Shakespeare. And the next time we do Shakespeare, you're going to learn a bit more. And we'll also look more into the play as well. Okay. So thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully I will see you next time. Okay.
Akili, 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 akili. Let's chase the germs away. Let's chase the germs away by keeping our hands clean. And when you want to sneeze or when you want to cough, do it in your elbow. Let's practice sneezing into your elbow. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Achoo! Again. Achoo! Yay! You did it! Germs, germs, germs. They make us sick. Germs, germs, germs. Germs, germs, germs are not your friends. When you're sick, you sneeze. Achoo! When you're sick, you cough, cough, cough. And if you achoo or cough on your hands, the germs stay alive on your hands.